Welcome to episode 45 of the Collecting Confidant with your host, GunstarHero. And I'm back with another trio of games. As you know, from episode to episode, I like to do a certain theme to tie all the titles together. And this one's going to be pretty new for me because I typically don't delve into these types of games. This is all going to be centered on psychological horror / mystery / visual novel concepts. All these games have elements of all of these, and we've got an exciting slate of games to get into. The first one is getting released as of today. April 11th, 2023 has been in demo format for a few weeks now for the Switch and PS4. Those are the only two platforms you can play this game on, and you can try it out now via the eShop or the PlayStation Store. This is Process of Elimination, which was developed and published by NIS Software. This one is a murder mystery visual novel game, but likes to mix things up by adding some actual strategy elements into the gameplay, which I found really compelling and exciting because I'll admit, I'm a total newcomer to the visual novel genre. I have never played Danganronpa or Phoenix Wright or Hatoful Boyfriend or any of those hallmarks of the visual novel genre, especially the romance games. It just never seemed like something that would appeal to me. I was kind of one of those old curmudgeons that was like, oh, well, if it's not a book, why am I going to sit and read it? But now, having played a couple of visual novels, especially the third game we're going to be talking about today, my God, I can understand where the video game medium offers something that the traditional book cannot offer in terms of just this extra level of interactivity. So I am definitely a fan now, and I like what Process of Elimination is trying to do because it's not only a visual novel, but adds some very clever turn-based strategy elements in the mix to keep it fresh and exciting from chapter to chapter. So, very briefly, the setup in this game is that there is a serial killer by the name of the Quartering Duke on the loose in Japan and has killed over 100 people, but has inspired other copycats. So the situation's getting out of control throughout the country, and the detective agency, this elite group of investigators, has been enlisted to foil the plot. So they have handpicked the best of their investigators and sent them to this island of Morgue to find out what's going on because, unfortunately, some of the previous detectives from the agency who were sent to this island have been killed. So now you play as this high school student named as Wado Hojo, who is an aspiring detective, looks up to the agency, but through some turn of events, inadvertently gets sent to the same island as the detectives and becomes the 14th detective on this roster to foil the plan of the Quartering Duke. But here's the kicker, is that you're finding out through to your chagrin that the Quartering Duke may just be one of you. So you can see where this story is going to take a lot of dark twists and turns. There's going to be betrayal and intrigue. Overall, a very satisfying package. And I'm going to say this demo is quite meaty. It took me a few hours to beat it, basically telling me that the full game itself is going to be quite long and sumptuous if you're into that appetite of reading. And yes, there is a lot of reading involved, but like I said, there are gameplay elements during the investigation sequences that are going to give you a break from that and give you a nice flow to the gameplay. So, talking about flow, let's talk about the four main factors of the gameplay flow. So number one, of course, we already mentioned that there is a visual novel aspect that starts out each portion of the game. The demo you're going to play, if you do play it, is one specific case among the many on the island you're going to encounter. So you'll go through this visual novel, you're going to encounter all the different characters, and the visual novel aspect has your familiar tropes. You'll be able to save or load at any time. You can either press through the dialogue screens at your own pace, or you can hit an auto read function. You can also hit a history function if you missed a detail or need to go review a piece of text that maybe you didn't catch the first time around. Plus, there is full voiceover during these scenes. Mind you, it is all in Japanese, so if you are kind of lazy like me and just like to listen once in a while, no, this game's going to require your full immersion because you are going to have to read the English subtitles if you don't understand Japanese. But that's fine. Minor point. Hopefully, maybe they'll do an update at some point in the future. But the voice acting itself is pretty solid and doesn't always take itself too seriously because the subject matter gets pretty grim and it's nice to have a bit of comic relief from time to time. So that's the visual novel aspect. part one of the gameplay flow, and then part two is eventually where you're going to stumble upon a dead body. And then this is where the gameplay fun begins, because you're going to segue into part three of the gameplay flow, which is the investigation simulation. And this is a total blast. It's very in-depth, a little too complex for its own good, but thankfully the game does a good way of tutorializing it so that you can get it. And I'd say you'll probably screw up a couple times the first time you try out this gameplay segment, but keep trying. You'll get the flow of the gameplay and you'll become a pro in no time. I don't want to get too in-depth into the gameplay mechanics, but the way it works is that you, as the incompetent detective, your job is to help keep all the other more skilled detectives in line. And what you do is you have this little D-pad where you can monitor all the activities of the detectives who are acting independently. And some of the detectives, based on how much trust you've built up with them, you'll be able to intervene with their actions and set them on a new course to progress the investigation further, whether it's moving them to a different spot on the map. You can also have them infer at different mystery points to solve riddles. You can have them inspect to find new evidence and new points of interest. You can have them analyze evidence to progress the investigation further. But then I did mention that this is kind of like a turn-based strategy bent. There are only a certain allotted number of hours for you to conduct your investigation, and if you run out of time, it's game over. So you want to move quickly, use your time efficiently, and encourage cooperation between the investigators, because that's the whole theme of the game, that no detective can solve a crime on their own. It requires teamwork. So like I said, each of the investigators has their own strengths, weaknesses, and personalities, and when you combine these strengths, you can get through the investigation a lot more efficiently, and then get to the fourth component of the gameplay flow, which is the actual resolution itself, where you review all the evidence that you've collected, all the riddles you've solved, and then your success depends on how much you are paying attention during the whole process, because you'll be asked a series of questions about all the data that's been collected, and every time you answer a question correctly, your trust level goes up. And in my case, I happened to answer all the questions correctly, so I ended up getting an S rating at the end of this, so you can see where the scoring comes into play and how efficiency comes into play. I like how deep this is and how much the gameplay involves you in it and how much you have to pay attention. I really found this fascinating, in addition to the very strong writing. Although sometimes it goes on a little bit, I can understand, because there is a lot of detail being poured into this game world to create a truly suspenseful mystery. And man, there are some truly grim scenes and some heartbreaking details. I found myself getting really invested in the characters and definitely want to see more. And if you are interested, like I said, you can play the demo right now on the Switch or the PS4. But if you want to pick this up physically, you can do this as of today, April 11th, 2023, from all major retailers for $49.99 US on the Switch and PS4. It's going to include not only a physical copy of the game, but also a digital copy of the soundtrack and a mini art book, and that's available while supplies last. Stay tuned, because the next game is another psychological murder mystery game with some visual novel elements, but overall is a first-person exploration game. You don't want to miss this one. Stay tuned. And we're back on episode 45 of the Collecting Confidant with your host, GunstarHero. This week's theme being games with psychological horror / mystery elements and some visual novel stylings. The second game on our docket today is one that got its hooks into me. I ended up getting the platinum trophy for this one because it just so engrossing. I had to see this through 100% because it was rich with lore and quirkiness and subversive humor. This one is Paradise Killer, a first-person, free-form, open-world exploration investigation game, and is the first effort from developer Kaizen Game Works, which is actually headed up by a duo of industry veterans, most notably Ollie Clark-Smith, who was the lead designer for Supermassive for Until Dawn and the Dark Pictures anthology. And then you also have Phil Crabtree, who is a programmer on a number of mobile and 3DS games. They came together to form this new developer, Kaizen Game Works, and This game is truly ambitious in its design in terms of giving you utter free reign over the game's narrative, but also the truth as to what comes out of your investigation and who you ultimately accuse of being the killer. This game is something else, but does have a bit of a learning curve to it in terms of how you get into its story universe, because it has a very specific language and there's a lot of lore that you need to wrap your head around to try to get into the game. But once you get used to that, this game will pull you in. And this doesn't have a traditional narrative through line. All you're presented with is this very simple scenario. You are on Paradise Island, which is this place separate from Earth, and it is home to the Syndicate, which is a bunch of immortals who worship dead alien gods, and beneath them you have these citizens who are the cattle of this island. And what has happened is that the council for the Syndicate have been brutally killed in this mass murder execution style. So now you play as Lady Love Dies, a former Syndicate member who was exiled and has now been brought back because of her investigative prowess to solve the murder mystery and to unravel this giant conspiracy. So you're basically presented with a few facts about what led up to the murder and some timelines, and from there, it's up to you to go and explore the island, do interrogations, uncover evidence, and find out what you can about the history of this island, about what happened around the murder, and of all the different psychopaths that inhabit the Syndicate to unravel this crazy conspiracy. And man, this game gets truly crazy and dark at certain points. But what I love is the fact that you control the flow of the narrative and the timing of the game. There literally is a trophy for beating this game in under 10 minutes. You can start the game, go right to the judge, and accuse somebody of murder right off the bat. But the more you put into this game, the deeper and richer it's going to get, because there are different characters to interrogate, and when you do, the way you pose your questions to them and what you choose to say is going to affect the different types of case files that you're going to develop. But then as you scour the island for clues and points and counterpoints, poking holes in alibis, the overall case files you're going to collect are going to get richer and more detailed. And what I'm going to suggest is, if you decide to play this game, there's one major tip I can give you. There are these things on the map known as foot baths, which you can find. There are a few of them, and they will give you upgraded traversal abilities. And if you do want to 100% this game and find every piece of evidence, every relic, anything that's going to deepen the lore and the experience of this game, you're going to have to upgrade your traversal capabilities to be able to get to every area of the island. I'll give you that much, and I'm going to tell you right now, I did put in the full 15 plus hours, scoured every inch of this island, and nothing was filler. Everything was deliberate. Everything contributed to the case I was building up. So by the time I did get to the end trial, I felt pretty, if not almost 100% confident in who the killer or killers were. But even then, truth is relative in this game, and that's the other theme of this game, that you basically make your own truth based on the facts that you get. You can accuse anybody, and you can judge or execute anybody in this game, and the endings are going to be different based on how you proceed, and also based on how much time you put into the game. That's all I can really say without spoiling too much. And I will say that because this is an open world game, you would typically expect to see NPCs walking around and maybe vehicles or something like that, where it actually seems very barren in this world. I don't think it has as much to do with budget as it has to do with theme, and that is explained very well as to why the island is very quiet, other than the Syndicate members that are around that you'll be interacting with and interrogating. This game was an utter blast. It does take some time to get into to really get a feel for the lore and the language of the game, but once you do, trust me, it's going to get your hooks into you. It plays really well, looks good. The only thing I'll say is that the soundtrack doesn't really tie into the theme very often, but again, lends into the quirky, uneasy nature of this game, and almost gives it that subtle horror element of this bouncy, happy music against this really dark, grim backdrop. This one, I highly recommend, and again, I platinumed this game. Loved every minute of it. It's fantastic, and if you do want to get this physically on either the PS4, PS5, or the Xbox One/Series X and S, you can do so via SerenityForge.com. This one is going for $39.99 USD, and it includes not only the game itself, but a digital soundtrack and a few other collectible goodies. Stay tuned. We're coming back with the final game on our docket. This is another visual novel, and trust me, you do not want to miss this one. Stay tuned. And we're back on episode 45 of the Collecting Confidant with your host, GunstarHero. This week's theme being murder, mystery / psychological horror with traces of visual novels. This third game is a straight up visual novel in the romance genre and is basically the reason why this totally flew under my radar, and I almost never played it until it got some very heavy recommendations from people I totally respect. This is Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. Before I begin, before I give you one of my most ultimate recommendations, you must play this game, and it is available for free, at least the base game is. I am going to warn you, number one, just like the game says when you start it up, this game is not for children. It is not for those who are easily disturbed, and if you have a history of depression or anxiety, this game could be very triggering. So I'm going to give you that warning from the outset. And I also have to give a tip of the hat to Colin Moriarty of Sacred Symbols. I listen to that show every week. And I remember on one particular episode, they were talking about Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, some of the best games of 2022. All he said is, I can't spoil much. Just play this game. Trust me, just play this game. That's all he said. And I understand why he was so cryptic about this, because I can't really say much about this game without spoiling it. So I'm just going to try to give you some very high level 30,000 foot view overview of this and try to sell it to you in a way that's going to perk your interest and prepare you for the devastating experience that it offers. Okay, so this is a 2D visual novel in the romance genre, which is very, very popular in Japan. And you are this high school student that every morning you meet up with your best friend, Sayori. You grew up together from childhood. And one day while walking to school, she urges you to join a literature club, which she is the vice president of. And you grudgingly accept her invitation because she's your childhood best friend. You don't want to disappoint her. So you go to this literature club and you meet up with these other three girls. There's Monica, the president, and there's also two other girls by the name of Yuri and Atsuki. And you're going to learn the different personality quirks of these girls as you get into the club. You learn that they're going to share literature. You learn about what types of books each girl likes. And then there's this whole minigame element that introduces the romance aspect of it, where at the end of each day, you are tasked by Monica to write a poem and bring it to the next club meeting. So when you write these poems, you're essentially going to be selecting from a list of keywords. And every time you choose one of the keywords, you're going to see a visible positive reaction from one of the three girls, whether it's Sayori, Natsuki, or Yuri, indicating that the poem you're writing is going to be more appealing to that particular girl when you bring it in the next day. Hence, you introduce the romance element and you start to choose the girl that you want to woo. And depending on what type of poem you write for what type of girl, it's going to unlock additional cutscenes and exposition. That's all I'm going to say. That's basically it. That's the surface level description of this insane psychological horror experience that I just can't spoil much more, but I'm going to tell you, this game hit me upside the head, left me reeling in a way that no game has ever done. That's all I can really say without spoiling too much. And again, on the marketing, it says it's a psychological horror game, so I'm not giving away too much here, but you're just going to have to see it for yourself. Why this is a game for the ages, why this is one of my new probably top 25 games of all time, and it's not that hard to see what I'm talking about because the original game, Doki Doki Literature Club, which came out from Team Salvato back in 2017, is still available for free on PC via ddlc.moe. I'll put the hyperlink in the description so you can go download it for yourself and try this out. But the whole reason to get the Plus edition is if you like what you've seen with the base game and you want to see more of the lore and the story universe, the Plus version includes 7 unlockable side stories that, depending on how many times you play through the game, you'll be able to unlock all this additional content and get that much more of a rich experience. But as Colin Moriarty said to me, just trust me, play this game. I'm going to tell you, the viewer, as well. Trust me, this game is going to shatter your mind. It is not only a love letter to the concept of video games being art above their own medium, but also just a wrecking ball to not only anime, but to the concept of video gaming itself. This one dropped me on my head, and it probably will too, but like I said, it is very dark. And if you can't handle it, you're probably going to steer clear. Especially don't show this to the young ones. This is a crazy experience, but something that's going to stay with you for days upon end. You've got to see this for yourself. And again, this is available physically for PS4, PS5, and the Switch from major retailers, but I would suggest going to the publisher SerenityForge.com themselves. You can get this one for $29.99 US. It includes the physical game, a digital soundtrack, and a whole bunch of other little physical collectibles inside the package. Such a terrific experience, and definitely one of the greatest games of this generation. You've been watching episode 45, The Collecting Confidant, with your host, GunstarHero. Make sure you like and subscribe, and especially in that comment section, if you've played Doki Doki and have any spoiler-free thoughts on how you felt playing this, I highly encourage you to share your thoughts. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one. Later, Game Chasers, and peace.